What if I told you that in ancient times, stealing a cabbage could cost you your life, or that lying to a king might result in being skinned alive? Welcome to a world where justice was anything but ordinary. Today, we're diving into the bizarre and often shocking realm of ancient laws and punishments. These rules, crafted by societies long gone, reveal just how strange, fascinating, and sometimes downright terrifying the pursuit of justice could be. From eye for an eye retribution to punishments that defy imagination, these laws offer a glimpse into the values, fears, and priorities of civilizations that shaped history. So, buckle up as we uncover 25 of the most bizarre ancient laws and punishments that will leave you questioning how far humanity has truly come. Stick around because by the end of this video, you'll never look at modern justice the same way again. Now, let's step into the world of ancient Mesopotamia, where one of the earliest known legal codes was etched into stone. The Code of Hammurabi, created by King Hammurabi of Babylon around 1750 BCE, is often hailed as one of history's first attempts to establish a formal system of justice. But this wasn't just any set of rules, it was built on a principle that might sound familiar: an eye for an eye. This idea, known as retributive justice, meant that the punishment for a crime would directly mirror the harm caused. For example, if someone blinded another person, they would lose their own eye as punishment. It was a harsh system, but it aimed to create fairness by ensuring that no one could inflict harm without facing equal consequences. What makes the Code of Hammurabi so fascinating is how it reflected the values of its time. It wasn't just about punishment, it was about maintaining order in a society where laws were often arbitrary. By codifying these rules, Hammurabi sought to bring consistency and predictability to justice. And while some of the punishments might seem extreme by today's standards, the code laid the groundwork for many legal systems that followed. Its influence can even be seen in modern laws, where the idea of proportional punishment still plays a role. So, while the concept of losing an eye for blinding someone might sound brutal, it's a reminder of how far legal systems have evolved and how much they owe to this ancient code. Moving from the ancient world of Mesopotamia, we now journey to the heart of the Roman Empire, where justice took on a particularly dramatic and symbolic form. One of the most chilling punishments in Roman law was reserved for parricide, the act of killing one's parent. This crime was seen as not just a personal betrayal, but an attack on the very foundation of Roman society, where family and paternal authority were sacred. To deter such an unthinkable act, the Romans devised a punishment as horrifying as it was symbolic. The offender would be sewn into a sack with live animals, often a snake, a dog, a rooster, and a monkey, and thrown into a river to drown. This gruesome method, known as the pona cullae, or punishment of the sack, was designed to reflect the gravity of the crime. The animals chosen weren't random. Each symbolized a different aspect of the offender's moral corruption. The snake represented treachery, the dog symbolized shamelessness, the rooster stood for aggression, and the monkey embodied chaos. Together, they painted a vivid picture of the criminal's descent into moral depravity. But why was this punishment so extreme? In Roman culture, the family was the cornerstone of society, and the father, or paterfamilias, held absolute authority over the household. To kill a parent wasn't just a personal crime, it was a direct assault on the social order. The Romans believed that such an act disrupted the natural harmony of the world, and the punishment needed to match the severity of the offense. By casting the offender into the river, they were symbolically cleansing society of the moral pollution caused by the crime. This punishment wasn't just about retribution. It was a public spectacle meant to reinforce the values of loyalty, respect, and familial duty. While it might seem barbaric by modern standards, the pona cullae offers a fascinating glimpse into how the Romans viewed justice, morality, and the sanctity of family. It's a stark reminder of how deeply cultural values can shape the way societies punish their worst offenders. Now, let's turn our attention to ancient Athens, where the concept of justice took a strikingly severe turn under the laws of Draco. Known for their extreme harshness, Draco's legal code was so unforgiving that even the smallest crimes, like stealing a cabbage, could lead to the death penalty. These laws were so notorious that they gave us the term draconian, which we still use today to describe excessively strict rules or punishments. But why were these laws so brutal? Draco believed that the only way to maintain order in society was through fear. By making the consequences of crime unbearably severe, he hoped to deter wrongdoing altogether. The punishments under Draco's laws were not just harsh, they were often disproportionate to the crimes committed. For example, debtors who couldn't pay their debts could be enslaved, and even minor thefts could result in execution. This extreme approach was meant to send a clear message: no crime, no matter how small, would go unpunished. However, this rigid system quickly became a source of tension in Athenian society. Many citizens felt that the laws were too oppressive, and the lack of flexibility led to widespread discontent. Over time, the harshness of Draco's laws became unsustainable. The people of Athens began to demand change, and eventually, a reformer named Solon stepped in to revise the legal code. Solon's reforms introduced more balanced and humane punishments, focusing on fairness rather than fear. While Draco's laws were eventually softened, their legacy remains. The term draconian serves as a reminder of a time when justice was synonymous with severity, and it highlights how societies evolve in their understanding of what it means to punish and protect. This shift from Draco's extreme measures to Solon's more equitable system marks an important chapter in the history of law, showing how even the strictest rules can be challenged and changed. Now, shifting our focus to the banks of the Nile, we find ourselves in ancient Egypt, where the sanctity of marriage and family was held in the highest regard. Adultery, in particular, was seen as a grave offense, not just against an individual but against the very fabric of society. The punishment for such a crime was as severe as the crime itself was considered dishonorable. In ancient Egypt, adultery was often met with brutal physical punishments, including beatings, mutilation, or even death, depending on the circumstances. For some, the punishment extended beyond the physical public shaming was a common tactic, designed to humiliate the offender and serve as a warning to others. The cultural context behind these harsh measures reveals just how deeply the Egyptians valued family and morality. Marriage was not just a personal bond but a sacred institution believed to be blessed by the gods. The stability of the family unit was seen as essential to the stability of the entire society. Adultery, therefore, wasn't just a betrayal of trust, it was an act that threatened the divine order. This belief was rooted in the Egyptian worldview, where harmony and balance, or mat, were central to both the cosmos and daily life. Any disruption to this balance, whether through crime or immorality, was met with swift and severe consequences. Interestingly, the punishment for adultery often varied depending on the social status of those involved. While commoners might face physical punishment or public disgrace, nobles or members of the royal family could face even harsher penalties, including exile or execution. This distinction highlights the importance of maintaining not just personal honor, but also the reputation of one's family and lineage. In a society where one's name and legacy were everything, the consequences of adultery could ripple through generations. As we reflect on these ancient laws, it's clear that the Egyptians viewed adultery not just as a personal failing, but as a threat to the very foundation of their civilization. Their strict punishments remind us of how deeply intertwined law, morality, and culture can be, shaping the way societies define and enforce justice. Next, we'll explore another fascinating legal system where the consequences of cowardice in battle were as severe as they were symbolic. Stay tuned. Now, let's set sail to the rugged lands of the Vikings, where the concept of outlawry was as fearsome as the warriors themselves. In Viking society, being declared an outlaw was one of the most severe punishments imaginable. It wasn't just a banishment, it was a complete expulsion from the community, stripping the offender of all legal protections and human rights. Once declared an outlaw, a person could be killed by anyone without fear of retribution, and they were forbidden from receiving help or shelter. In essence, they were left to fend for themselves in a world that had turned its back on them. This practice, known as utlaga in Old Norse, was a powerful tool for maintaining order in Viking communities. The Vikings lived in tightly knit groups where trust and loyalty were paramount. Any act that threatened this social fabric, whether it was murder, theft, or betrayal, was met with swift and decisive action. By declaring someone an outlaw, the community sent a clear message: actions that harmed others would not be tolerated. It was a way of preserving harmony and ensuring that everyone adhered to the unwritten rules of Viking life. But outlawry wasn't just about punishment, it was also about deterrence. The fear of being cast out and left to die alone in the wilderness was enough to keep most people in line. For the Vikings, survival depended on the strength of the group, and being cut off from that group was a fate worse than death. This harsh punishment reflected the harsh realities of their world, where resources were scarce and the stakes of survival were high. Interestingly, the practice of outlawry also highlights the Vikings' deep respect for law and justice. While they are often remembered as fierce warriors, they were also a people who valued order and fairness. Outlawry wasn't handed down arbitrarily. It was the result of a formal legal process, often decided by a council of elders or a local assembly. This shows that even in a society known for its brutality, there was a system in place to ensure that justice was served. As we reflect on the Viking law of outlawry, it's clear that this punishment was more than just a means of dealing with criminals. It was a way of preserving the very essence of Viking society. It reminds us that for the Vikings, the survival of the community always came first, and those who threatened that survival faced the ultimate consequence. Next, we'll journey to ancient China, where one of the most brutal punishments in history was used to strike fear into the hearts of would-be criminals. Stay tuned. Now, let's turn our attention to ancient China, where one of the most infamous and gruesome punishments in history was practiced: Ling Chai, often referred to as death by 1,000 cuts. This method of execution was as horrifying as it sounds, designed not just to end a life but to inflict maximum suffering and serve as a stark warning to others. Ling Chai involved the slow dismemberment of the condemned, with the body being systematically cut apart over an extended period. The process was meticulously calculated to prolong agony, often beginning with less vital areas to ensure the victim remained conscious for as long as possible. The use of Ling Chai was deeply rooted in the philosophy of deterrence. In ancient China, maintaining social order was paramount, and punishments were designed to be so severe that they would discourage anyone from even considering breaking the law. Ling Chai was reserved for the most heinous crimes such as treason, rebellion, or acts that threatened the stability of the empire. By making the punishment public, authorities aimed to instill fear and reinforce the idea that such crimes would not only result in death, but in a death so excruciating that it would serve as a cautionary tale for generations. Interestingly, Ling Chai also carried a symbolic weight. In Chinese culture, the body was seen as a gift from one's ancestors, and to destroy it in such a manner was considered a profound dishonor. This added layer of shame further amplified the punishment's impact, as it not only ended a life but also tarnished the individual's legacy. The practice was so deeply ingrained in the legal system that it persisted for centuries, even as other forms of punishment evolved. However, by the early 20th century, the tide began to turn. As China faced increasing pressure from foreign powers and internal calls for modernization, the brutality of Ling Chai came under scrutiny. Reformers argued that such punishments were barbaric and incompatible with a modern, civilized society. In 1905, the practice was officially abolished, marking the end of one of history's most chilling methods of execution. The legacy of Ling Chai serves as a stark reminder of how far societies have come in their approach to justice and punishment. While it may seem unimaginable today, this practice was once seen as a necessary tool for maintaining order. As we reflect on its history, we're reminded of the importance of progress and the ongoing evolution of legal systems worldwide. Next, we'll explore another ancient society's approach to justice, where lying to the king could result in a punishment almost as terrifying as Ling Chai. Stay with us as we uncover the Persian punishment for deceit. Now, let's journey to ancient Persia, where loyalty to the king was not just expected, it was demanded, and the consequences for betrayal were as brutal as they were unforgettable. In the Persian Empire, lying to the king was considered one of the gravest offenses, a direct challenge to the ruler's authority and the stability of the empire itself. The punishment for such deceit, being skinned alive, this gruesome method of execution was designed to serve as a chilling reminder of the king's absolute power and the dire consequences of disloyalty. The act of skinning someone alive, known as flaying, was not merely a physical punishment but a deeply symbolic one. In Persian culture, the skin was seen as a representation of one's identity and honor. To strip someone of their skin was to erase their very essence, leaving them unrecognizable and dishonored even in death. This punishment was reserved for those who dared to deceive the king, as it sent a clear message. Betrayal would not only end your life but also destroy your legacy. Historical accounts provide a glimpse into the severity of this punishment. One notable example comes from the reign of King Cambyses II, who ruled Persia in the 6th century before the Common Era. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, Cambyses ordered the flaying of a judge who was found guilty of accepting bribes and delivering unjust rulings. The king then had the judge's skin used to upholster the seat of his successor, a macabre reminder of the consequences of corruption and dishonesty. This extreme measure underscored the importance of integrity and fairness in the Persian legal system, as well as the king's role as the ultimate enforcer of justice. The emphasis on truth and loyalty in Persian culture was deeply rooted in the empire's political and social structure. The king was not just a ruler but a divine figure, seen as the representative of the gods on earth. To lie to the king was to defy the divine order itself, making the punishment not only a legal consequence but also a moral and spiritual one. This belief in the king's sacred authority helped maintain order and cohesion across the vast and diverse Persian Empire, where loyalty to the crown was essential for stability. While the practice of flaying may seem unimaginably cruel by modern standards, it reflects the values and priorities of ancient Persian society. Truth and loyalty were not just virtues but necessities, and the punishments for violating these principles were designed to be as unforgettable as they were severe. As we reflect on this chapter of history, we're reminded of how deeply cultural values can shape the methods of justice and punishment. Next, we'll travel to ancient Greece, where stealing from a temple could lead to a fate as dramatic as being thrown off a cliff. Stay with us as we uncover the consequences of sacrilege in the ancient world. Now, let's turn our attention to ancient Greece, where the sacred and the secular were deeply intertwined, and crimes against the gods were met with some of the most dramatic punishments imaginable. In ancient Greek society, temples were not just places of worship, they were the heart of religious and civic life, housing treasures, offerings, and the very essence of divine presence. To steal from a temple was not merely a crime against property, it was an act of sacrilege, a direct affront to the gods themselves. The punishment for such an offense. It could range from exile to being thrown off a cliff, a fate as swift as it was terrifying. The severity of these punishments reflects the profound reverence the ancient Greeks held for their temples. These structures were seen as the earthly homes of the gods, places where the divine and mortal worlds intersected. To violate a temple was to disrupt this sacred connection, inviting the wrath of the gods and jeopardizing the well-being of the entire community. In a society where religion permeated every aspect of life, from politics to warfare, such crimes were not taken lightly. The punishment had to be severe enough to deter others and to appease the offended deities. One of the most infamous examples of this comes from the city of Athens, where the Acropolis stood as a symbol of divine protection and civic pride. Stealing from the temples on the Acropolis was considered an unforgivable act, and those caught in the act could face execution by being hurled from the cliffs of the Acropolis itself. This method of punishment, known as barathron, was not only a physical end but also a symbolic one. The fall from such a height was seen as a rejection by both the gods and the community, a final expulsion from the sacred and social order. Exile, another common punishment for temple robbery, carried its own weight of consequences. To be exiled was to be cut off from one's family, city, and the protection of the gods. In a world where identity was deeply tied to one's polis or city-state, exile was a form of social and spiritual death. The exiled individual was often left to wander, stripped of their rights and status, a living reminder of the cost of sacrilege. The religious significance of temples in ancient Greece cannot be overstated. They were not just buildings but symbols of divine favor and communal identity. The treasures housed within them were offerings to the gods, meant to ensure their continued protection and blessings. To steal from a temple was to steal from the gods themselves, an act that threatened the very fabric of society. The harsh punishments for such crimes were a reflection of the high stakes involved, a way to maintain order and divine favor in a world where the gods were ever present and ever watchful. As we reflect on these ancient laws, we're reminded of how deeply intertwined religion and justice were in the ancient world. The punishments for temple robbery were not just about retribution, but about restoring balance and appeasing the gods. Next, we'll explore the Aztec approach to public drunkenness, where even a single misstep could lead to severe consequences. Stay with us as we uncover more about the fascinating and often harsh world of ancient laws and punishments. Now, let's journey across the globe to the vibrant and complex world of the Aztecs, where the rules surrounding alcohol were as strict as they were revealing of their societal values. In Aztec culture, drunkenness wasn't just frowned upon, it was seen as a serious moral failing, one that could disrupt the delicate balance of their highly structured society. The punishment for public drunkenness varied depending on one's social standing, but it was always severe, reflecting the Aztecs' deep concern for order and discipline. For commoners, the consequences of being caught drunk in public could be deadly. The Aztecs believed that excessive drinking led to chaos and dishonor, traits that were intolerable in a society built on strict hierarchies and communal responsibility. Commoners who indulged in drunken behavior risked execution, often by being beaten to death or stoned. This harsh punishment served as a stark reminder to the masses that self-control and sobriety were not just personal virtues but civic duties. Nobles, on the other hand, faced a different kind of penalty. While they were not typically executed for drunkenness, their punishment was no less humiliating. Nobles caught drinking excessively were often subjected to public shaming, their hair cut short or their faces painted to mark their disgrace. This form of punishment was designed to strip them of their dignity and serve as a warning to others of their class. After all, in a society where nobility was expected to set an example, any lapse in behavior was seen as a betrayal of their role. But why were the Aztecs so strict about alcohol? To understand this, we need to look at their cultural attitudes toward drinking. Alcohol, in the form of pulque, a fermented drink made from the maguey plant, was deeply embedded in Aztec rituals and religious practices. It was often consumed during ceremonies to honor the gods, particularly those associated with fertility and agriculture. However, outside of these sacred contexts, drinking was heavily regulated. The Aztecs believed that alcohol had the power to cloud judgment and incite disorder, traits that were incompatible with their vision of a harmonious society. This duality, alcohol as both sacred and dangerous, shaped the Aztecs' approach to its consumption. While it played a vital role in their spiritual life, its misuse was met with swift and severe consequences. The strict laws against drunkenness were not just about maintaining order, they were also about preserving the moral fabric of their civilization. In a world where the gods were believed to be ever watchful, any behavior that threatened the community's well-being was seen as a direct affront to divine authority. As we reflect on the Aztec approach to drunkenness, we're reminded of how deeply cultural values can shape laws and punishments. The Aztec strict regulations reveal a society that prized discipline, hierarchy, and communal responsibility above all else. Next, we'll delve into the rigid caste system of ancient India, where violating social norms could lead to some of the harshest punishments imaginable. Stay with us as we continue our journey through the fascinating and often unforgiving world of ancient laws and punishments. Now, let's turn our attention to ancient India, where the caste system was not just a social structure but a deeply ingrained framework that governed every aspect of life. The caste system, known as Varna, divided society into four main groups: Brahmins, priests and scholars; Kshatriyas, warriors and rulers; Vaishyas, merchants and farmers; and Shudras, servants and laborers. Each caste had its own duties, privileges and restrictions, and crossing these boundaries was considered a grave offense. The punishments for violating caste rules were severe, reflecting the immense importance placed on maintaining social order and religious harmony. For example, if someone from a lower caste dared to marry or even interact intimately with someone from a higher caste, the consequences could be brutal. In some cases, the offender might face public flogging, exile, or even death. These punishments were not just about enforcing social hierarchy, they were also rooted in religious beliefs. The caste system was seen as divinely ordained, with each Varna representing a different part of the cosmic order. To disrupt this order was to defy the gods themselves, inviting divine wrath upon the entire community. One particularly harsh punishment involved the concept of untouchability. Those who were deemed untouchable, often because they performed jobs considered impure, such as handling waste or dead animals, were ostracized from society. They were forbidden from entering temples, drawing water from communal wells, or even walking in the same streets as higher caste individuals. Violating these rules could result in violent retribution, as the purity of the higher castes was believed to be at stake. This extreme segregation was justified through religious texts, which claimed that contact with the impure could corrupt one's soul and jeopardize their spiritual progress. But why was the caste system so rigidly enforced? To understand this, we need to look at the broader cultural and religious context of ancient India. The caste system was closely tied to the concept of dharma, or one's duty in life. Each caste had its own dharma, and fulfilling it was seen as essential for maintaining cosmic balance. Those who violated caste rules were not just breaking social norms, they were disrupting the very fabric of the universe. This belief made the enforcement of caste laws not just a matter of social control but a sacred obligation. The punishments for caste violations also served as a deterrent, reinforcing the idea that stepping out of one's prescribed role would lead to dire consequences. This strict adherence to caste rules created a society that was highly stratified but also remarkably stable. For centuries, the caste system shaped every aspect of life in ancient India, from marriage and occupation to diet and dress. While it provided a sense of order and identity, it also perpetuated inequality and suffering for those at the bottom of the hierarchy. As we reflect on the caste system and its punishments, we're reminded of how deeply intertwined law, religion, and social structure can be. The harsh penalties for caste violations reveal a society that prioritized order and tradition above individual freedom, a theme we'll see echoed in other ancient civilizations. Next, we'll explore the Babylonian approach to justice, where false accusations could lead to some surprising consequences. Stay with us as we continue our journey through the fascinating and often unforgiving world of ancient laws and punishments. Now, shifting our focus to ancient Babylon, we encounter a legal system that was as clever as it was harsh. One of the most intriguing laws from the Code of Hammurabi dealt with false accusations. In Babylon, if someone accused another person of a crime and couldn't prove it, the accuser would face the very punishment they had sought for the accused. This principle, known as lex talionis, or an eye for an eye, was designed to ensure fairness and discourage baseless claims. For instance, if a person accused someone of theft and failed to provide sufficient evidence, they could be fined or even subjected to the same penalty the accused would have faced if found guilty. This law applied to a wide range of offenses, from property disputes to more serious crimes like assault. The logic behind this was straightforward. It discouraged people from making false accusations out of malice or personal gain. After all, no one would want to risk facing the same punishment they were trying to impose on someone else. This approach also reflected the Babylonian emphasis on justice and balance. By holding accusers accountable, the law aimed to create a system where truth and evidence were paramount. It wasn't just about punishing wrongdoing, it was about maintaining social harmony and ensuring that the legal process was fair and transparent. In a society where reputation and honor were highly valued, the fear of being exposed as a false accuser was a powerful deterrent. Interestingly, this law also highlights the importance of evidence in Babylonian justice. Accusations couldn't be made lightly, they had to be backed by proof. This requirement encouraged people to think carefully before making claims, knowing that the consequences of being wrong could be severe. It's a reminder that even in ancient times, societies recognized the dangers of unchecked accusations and the need for a balanced legal system. As we consider this Babylonian law, it's fascinating to see how it mirrors some modern legal principles, such as the idea of perjury or the consequences of making false statements in court. The Babylonians understood that justice isn't just about punishing the guilty, it's also about protecting the innocent from unfounded claims. This balance between accountability and fairness is a theme that resonates across cultures and centuries. With this glimpse into Babylonian justice, we're reminded of how ancient laws often sought to address universal human concerns: truth, fairness, and the consequences of our actions. Next, we'll turn to ancient Sparta, where cowardice in battle was met with some of the most severe punishments in history. Stay with us as we uncover more about the fascinating and often brutal world of ancient laws and punishments. Now, let's journey to ancient Sparta, a society where courage wasn't just admired, it was demanded. In Sparta, cowardice in battle was considered one of the gravest offenses, and the punishments were designed to reflect the severity of the crime. Unlike other societies that might imprison or fine those who fled from battle, the Spartans took a far more public and humiliating approach. A soldier who showed cowardice could expect to face public shaming, exile, or even worse, complete social ostracism. In Sparta, bravery wasn't just a virtue, it was the foundation of their entire way of life. From a young age, Spartan boys were trained in the agoge, a rigorous military education system that emphasized discipline, endurance, and fearlessness. The idea was to mold them into warriors who would rather die than retreat. This cultural obsession with bravery meant that cowardice wasn't just a personal failing, it was a betrayal of the entire community. One of the most infamous punishments for cowardice was being labeled a tressus or a trembler. These individuals were forced to wear distinctive clothing, often a patchwork of rags, to mark them as cowards. They were barred from participating in public life, denied the right to marry, and even their families were shamed by association. In a society where honor was everything, this punishment was devastating. It wasn't just about punishing the individual, it was about sending a clear message to everyone else. In Sparta, there was no room for fear. Exile was another common punishment. A coward might be banished from the city, stripped of their citizenship, and left to fend for themselves in a world that offered little mercy to those without a community. For a Spartan, this was a fate worse than death. Their identity was so tied to their role as a warrior that losing their place in society was the ultimate disgrace. What's fascinating about these punishments is how deeply they reflect Spartan values. The Spartans believed that a single act of cowardice could weaken the entire army, and by extension, the state. Their harsh punishments weren't just about retribution. They were about maintaining the integrity of their military and ensuring that every soldier understood the stakes. In a world where survival depended on unity and strength, there was no tolerance for weakness. As we reflect on these Spartan laws, it's striking to see how they contrast with modern ideas of justice. Today, we might view such punishments as excessively cruel, but for the Spartans, they were necessary to uphold the ideals that defined their society. Their emphasis on bravery and discipline shaped not just their military but their entire culture, leaving a legacy that continues to fascinate us centuries later. With this look at Sparta's uncompromising stance on cowardice, we're reminded of how deeply laws and punishments are tied to the values of a society. Next, we'll explore how the Mayans dealt with adultery, a crime that carried its own unique and often brutal consequences. Stay with us as we continue our journey through the strange and fascinating world of ancient laws and punishments. Now, let's turn our attention to the ancient Mayans, a civilization known for its remarkable achievements in art, science, and architecture. But beneath their cultural sophistication lay a strict moral code, particularly when it came to marriage and fidelity. In Mayan society, adultery wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a crime against the community, and the punishments reflected the gravity of the offense. For the Mayans, marriage was more than a union between two individuals. It was a sacred bond that upheld the social and spiritual order. Fidelity was seen as essential to maintaining harmony within families and, by extension, the entire community. Adultery disrupted this balance, and the consequences were severe. Depending on the circumstances, those found guilty of adultery could face public humiliation, physical punishment, or even death. One of the most common punishments for adultery was public shaming. The guilty party might be paraded through the streets, subjected to ridicule, or forced to wear symbols of their infidelity. This wasn't just about punishing the individual, it was a way to reinforce societal norms and deter others from committing similar offenses. In a culture where reputation and honor were paramount, public humiliation was a devastating penalty. In more extreme cases, adultery could result in death. The method of execution varied, but it often involved brutal and symbolic acts meant to serve as a stark warning to others. For example, some accounts suggest that adulterers were stoned to death or thrown from high places. These punishments were not only about retribution, but also about restoring the moral order that adultery had disrupted. What's particularly interesting is how these punishments reflect the Mayans' deep connection to their spiritual beliefs. They saw adultery as a violation of divine laws, not just human ones. By punishing it harshly, they believed they were appeasing the gods and ensuring the continued prosperity of their society. This intertwining of morality, religion, and law highlights how deeply the Mayans valued social cohesion and spiritual harmony. As we consider these ancient laws, it's striking to see how they contrast with modern attitudes toward adultery. While today's punishments are far less severe, the Mayan approach reminds us of how deeply cultural values shape the way societies define and respond to wrongdoing. Their emphasis on fidelity and community underscores the importance they placed on maintaining social stability, even if it meant resorting to extreme measures. With this glimpse into the Mayan approach to adultery, we're reminded once again of how laws and punishments reflect the priorities of a society. Next, we'll delve into the harsh consequences of treason in ancient Japan, where loyalty to the state was a matter of life and death. Stay with us as we continue our exploration of the strange and often brutal world of ancient laws and punishments. Now, shifting our focus to ancient Japan, we uncover a society where loyalty was not just a virtue but a matter of life and death. In a culture deeply rooted in honor and duty, treason was considered one of the gravest offenses, punishable by some of the most severe methods imaginable. The consequences for betraying one's lord or the state were brutal, reflecting the high value placed on loyalty in Japanese society. In ancient Japan, treason was seen as a direct attack on the social and political order. The samurai class, in particular, lived by a strict code of conduct known as Bushido, which emphasized unwavering loyalty to one's master. To betray this trust was to dishonor not only oneself but also one's family and ancestors. As a result, punishments for treason were designed to be both retributive and symbolic, serving as a stark warning to others. One of the most common punishments for treason was crucifixion. This method was not only excruciatingly painful but also highly public, intended to humiliate the offender and deter others from following their example. The condemned would be tied or nailed to a wooden cross and left to die slowly, often in a visible location where the community could witness the consequences of disloyalty. This public display reinforced the idea that treason was a crime against the entire society, not just an individual. Another frequent punishment was decapitation, a swift but equally severe penalty. The act of beheading was often carried out in a ceremonial manner, underscoring the gravity of the crime. In some cases, the severed head would be displayed as a grim reminder of the fate awaiting those who dared to betray their lord or country. This practice was not just about punishment but also about restoring the honor that had been tarnished by the act of treason. The harshness of these punishments reflects the central role loyalty played in Japanese culture. Loyalty was seen as the foundation of social stability, and any breach of this trust was met with extreme measures. The samurai, in particular, were expected to demonstrate absolute fidelity, even at the cost of their own lives. This emphasis on loyalty extended beyond the warrior class, influencing the broader societal values of honor, duty, and respect for authority. What's fascinating is how these ancient practices reveal the interconnectedness of law, morality, and culture in Japan. Treason wasn't just a legal offense, it was a moral failing that threatened the very fabric of society. By punishing it so severely, the Japanese sought to preserve the integrity of their social order and uphold the values that defined their civilization. As we reflect on these ancient laws, it's clear that the Japanese approach to treason was as much about maintaining cultural identity as it was about enforcing justice. Their emphasis on loyalty and honor offers a stark contrast to modern legal systems, reminding us of how deeply historical values shape the way societies define and respond to betrayal. With this exploration of ancient Japan's harsh penalties for treason, we're reminded once again of the profound ways laws reflect a society's priorities. Next, we'll turn our attention to the Roman Empire, where arson was met with equally severe consequences. Stay with us as we continue our journey through the strange and often brutal world of ancient laws and punishments. Now, let's journey from the strict codes of ancient Japan to the grandeur of the Roman Empire, where fire held a dual role, both as a tool of civilization and a weapon of destruction. In ancient Rome, arson was not just a crime against property, it was an attack on the very fabric of urban life, and the punishments reflected the severity of this offense. Arson, the deliberate act of setting fire to property, was considered one of the most dangerous crimes in Rome. Given the city's dense population and its reliance on wooden structures, a single act of arson could quickly spiral into a catastrophic disaster, threatening entire neighborhoods. To deter such acts, Roman law imposed some of the harshest penalties imaginable. One of the most common punishments for arsonists was to be burned alive, a method that mirrored the crime itself. This form of retributive justice was meant to serve as a stark warning to others, emphasizing the destructive power of fire and the consequences of misusing it. Historical accounts suggest that arson was often linked to political or personal vendettas. For instance, during the reign of Emperor Nero, the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD devastated much of the city. While Nero famously blamed Christians for the disaster, rumors persisted that he himself had ordered the fire to clear space for his grand architectural projects. Whether true or not, the incident highlights how fire could be wielded as a tool of power and destruction, and how its misuse was met with public outrage and severe legal repercussions. Fire held a complex significance in Roman society. On one hand, it was essential for daily life, used for cooking, heating, and lighting. On the other hand, it was a symbol of both creation and destruction, revered in religious rituals and feared for its uncontrollable nature. The Vestal Virgins, priestesses of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, were tasked with maintaining the sacred fire of Rome, which was believed to protect the city. This duality made arson not just a crime against individuals, but an affront to the gods and the stability of the state. The Roman approach to punishing arson reveals much about their priorities. By making the punishment so extreme, they sought to protect their densely populated cities from the chaos that fire could unleash. It also underscores the Roman belief in proportional justice, where the punishment fit the crime in both severity and symbolism. Burning an arsonist alive was not just about retribution, it was a public statement about the sanctity of order and the consequences of disrupting it. As we reflect on these ancient laws, it's striking how fire, a force of both life and destruction, shaped Roman legal and cultural attitudes. The harsh penalties for arson remind us of the delicate balance ancient societies sought to maintain between progress and protection. Next, we'll explore how ancient Mesopotamia dealt with another pressing issue, debt, and the surprising ways they sought to maintain economic stability. Stay with us as we uncover more fascinating insights into the world of ancient laws and punishments. Now, shifting our focus from the fiery punishments of ancient Rome, let's turn our attention to the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, where debt was a matter of life and freedom. In ancient Mesopotamia, debt wasn't just a financial burden, it could completely alter the course of a person's life, often leading to drastic consequences. In this early civilization, debt was a common issue, especially among farmers and laborers who relied on loans to plant crops or sustain their families during tough times. However, failing to repay these debts could result in severe penalties. One of the most striking punishments was the possibility of being sold into slavery. Debtors who couldn't meet their obligations risked losing their freedom, becoming the property of their creditors. This practice wasn't just about punishment, it was a way for creditors to recover their losses, even if it meant stripping individuals of their autonomy. But slavery wasn't the only option. In some cases, debtors were forced to work off their debts through labor. This system, known as debt bondage, required individuals to toil for their creditors until the debt was considered repaid. While this might sound slightly less harsh than outright slavery, it often trapped people in cycles of labor with little hope of ever gaining true freedom. The line between debt bondage and slavery was often blurred, as the conditions of labor could be grueling and exploitative. The economic implications of these laws were profound. On one hand, they provided a way to stabilize the economy by ensuring that debts were repaid, even if it came at a high human cost. On the other hand, they perpetuated social inequality, as the poor and vulnerable were disproportionately affected. Wealthier individuals who could afford to lend money held significant power over those who borrowed, creating a system where the rich grew richer and the poor struggled to escape their circumstances. Socially, these laws reinforced class divisions and highlighted the precarious nature of life for many in ancient Mesopotamia. Debt wasn't just a personal issue, it was a societal one, with far-reaching consequences for families and communities. The threat of losing one's freedom or being separated from loved ones loomed large, shaping the way people lived and interacted with one another. Interestingly, Mesopotamian rulers occasionally issued debt relief decrees, known as clean slate laws, to alleviate the burden on debtors and restore social order. These acts of mercy, often tied to religious or political events, provided temporary relief but didn't address the underlying issues of inequality and exploitation. The Mesopotamian approach to debt reveals a society grappling with the complexities of economic stability and human dignity. While their laws sought to maintain order, they also exposed the harsh realities faced by those at the bottom of the social ladder. As we continue our journey through ancient laws and punishments, we'll next explore how ancient Egypt dealt with tax evasion, a crime that carried its own set of severe consequences. Stay tuned as we uncover more intriguing aspects of history's most bizarre legal systems. Now, let's journey from the fertile plains of Mesopotamia to the sun-soaked banks of the Nile, where ancient Egypt's approach to taxation reveals a society deeply invested in maintaining order and prosperity. In ancient Egypt, taxes weren't just a civic duty, they were the lifeblood of the state, funding everything from monumental construction projects like the pyramids to the maintenance of a vast administrative system. But failing to pay your taxes, that was a crime met with some of the harshest punishments imaginable. Tax evasion in ancient Egypt was no small offense. The state relied heavily on taxes to sustain its economy and fund its ambitious projects, so avoiding payment was seen as a direct threat to the stability of the kingdom. For those caught evading taxes, the consequences were severe. One common punishment was physical beatings, often administered publicly to serve as a warning to others. These beatings weren't just about inflicting pain, they were a form of public shaming designed to deter others from following the same path. But physical punishment wasn't the only option. Tax evaders could also be sentenced to forced labor, working on state projects like building temples, digging canals, or quarrying stone. This wasn't just a punishment, it was a way for the state to recoup the lost revenue by extracting labor directly from the offender. Imagine spending years toiling under the scorching sun, all because you tried to avoid paying your dues. It was a brutal reminder of the power the state held over its citizens. The importance of taxes in ancient Egypt cannot be overstated. They were essential for funding the construction of iconic structures like the pyramids, which required not just materials but also a massive workforce. Taxes also supported the military, ensuring the kingdom's defense, and funded the vast bureaucracy that kept the state running smoothly. In a society where the pharaoh was seen as a divine ruler, paying taxes was almost a religious duty, a way to contribute to the prosperity and stability of the kingdom. Interestingly, the Egyptian tax system was highly organized, with scribes meticulously recording payments and ensuring compliance. Farmers paid taxes in the form of grain, while craftsmen and merchants contributed goods or labor. This system allowed the state to function efficiently, but it also placed a heavy burden on the population, especially during times of poor harvests or economic hardship. For those struggling to make ends meet, the threat of punishment for unpaid taxes added an extra layer of stress to daily life. The harsh punishments for tax evasion highlight the delicate balance ancient Egypt sought to maintain between enforcing order and ensuring the well-being of its people. While the state needed taxes to thrive, the penalties for non-compliance often fell hardest on the most vulnerable, creating a system where the poor bore the brunt of the consequences. As we move forward, we'll explore another fascinating aspect of ancient justice: how ancient Greece dealt with sacrilege, a crime that struck at the heart of their religious and cultural identity. Stay tuned as we uncover more of history's most intriguing legal systems. Now, let's turn our attention to the ancient Greeks, a civilization deeply rooted in religion and mythology, where the line between the sacred and the profane was sharply defined. In ancient Greece, sacrilege acts that defiled or disrespected sacred spaces, objects, or rituals was considered one of the most serious crimes one could commit. The Greeks believed that the gods were deeply involved in human affairs, and offending them could bring divine wrath upon the entire community. As a result, punishments for sacrilege were severe, often involving exile or even death. One of the most striking examples of this can be seen in the punishment for defiling a temple. Temples were not just places of worship, they were the physical homes of the gods on earth. To damage or disrespect these spaces was seen as a direct insult to the deities themselves. Those found guilty of such crimes could face exile, a punishment that stripped them of their citizenship and severed their ties to their community. Exile was more than just a physical removal, it was a social and spiritual death, leaving the offender isolated and dishonored. In some cases, the punishment for sacrilege was even more extreme. Certain crimes, like stealing sacred objects or committing acts of violence within a temple, could result in execution. The Greeks believed that such acts polluted the sacred space and required purification, often through the blood of the offender. This harsh response underscores the importance of maintaining the sanctity of religious sites and rituals in Greek society. The religious significance of sacrilege cannot be overstated. The Greeks saw their gods as active participants in daily life, capable of blessing or cursing individuals and communities. A single act of sacrilege could provoke divine anger, leading to disasters like crop failures, plagues, or military defeats. To prevent such calamities, the Greeks took great care to enforce strict laws protecting their sacred spaces and ensuring that rituals were performed correctly. Interestingly, the concept of sacrilege extended beyond physical acts. Blasphemy, speaking disrespectfully of the gods, was also considered a form of sacrilege and could result in severe penalties. This reflects the Greek belief that words had power and that disrespectful speech could anger the gods just as much as physical desecration. As we move forward, we'll explore another fascinating aspect of ancient justice: how the Aztecs dealt with theft, a crime that carried its own unique set of consequences in their highly structured society. Stay tuned as we continue to uncover the strange and often brutal ways ancient civilizations maintained order and upheld their values. Now, shifting our focus to the Aztec civilization, we find a society that placed immense value on order and justice, particularly when it came to protecting personal and communal property. In Aztec culture, theft was not just a crime against an individual, it was seen as a threat to the stability of the entire community. The Aztecs believed that maintaining social harmony required strict enforcement of laws, and theft was met with some of the harshest punishments imaginable. For commoners, the penalty for theft often depended on the value of the stolen goods. Stealing something of minor worth might result in enslavement, where the thief would be forced to work for the victim or the community to repay their debt. This form of punishment served a dual purpose. It compensated the victim while also deterring others from committing similar crimes. However, for more serious thefts, such as stealing valuable items or food during times of scarcity, the punishment could be far more severe: death. The Aztecs believed that such acts endangered the survival of the community and therefore warranted the ultimate penalty. Interestingly, the Aztecs also had a unique perspective on property. While personal possessions were respected, communal resources like farmland and water were considered sacred and essential for the collective well-being. Stealing from these shared resources was viewed as a direct attack on the community's survival and was punished even more harshly than theft from an individual. This reflects the Aztec emphasis on collective responsibility and the idea that everyone had a duty to contribute to the common good. The Aztecs' approach to justice was deeply rooted in their religious beliefs. They saw crime as a disruption of the cosmic order, which could anger the gods and bring misfortune upon the entire society. Punishments, therefore, were not just about retribution, they were also a way to restore balance and appease the deities. This spiritual dimension added an extra layer of severity to their legal system, making theft not just a legal offense but a moral and religious transgression as well. As we've seen, the Aztecs' strict laws against theft reveal a society that prioritized stability, fairness, and the protection of both individual and communal property. Their punishments, while harsh by modern standards, were designed to maintain order and ensure the survival of their tightly knit communities. Next, we'll delve into another intriguing aspect of ancient justice: how rebellion was dealt with in ancient China, where the consequences could extend far beyond the individual offender. Stay with us as we uncover more about the fascinating and often brutal ways ancient civilizations upheld their laws. Now, turning our attention to ancient China, we encounter a legal system that was as unforgiving as it was effective in maintaining imperial authority. Rebellion, in particular, was seen as the ultimate crime, a direct challenge to the emperor's divine mandate to rule. The punishments for such acts were not only severe but also designed to send a chilling message to anyone who might consider defying the state. In ancient China, rebellion was met with the harshest penalties imaginable. The primary punishment for those found guilty of treason or insurrection was execution, often carried out in the most public and gruesome manner possible. Methods like decapitation, strangulation, or even being torn apart by horses were used to ensure that the punishment was not only fatal but also deeply humiliating. The goal was to make an example of the offender, deterring others from even contemplating rebellion, but the punishment didn't stop with the individual. In a practice known as extermination of the three clans, the family of the rebel, including parents, siblings, and children, could also be executed. In some cases, this extended even further to include distant relatives, effectively wiping out entire family lines. This brutal approach was rooted in the belief that rebellion was not just the act of one person but a collective crime that implicated the entire family. By punishing the family, the state aimed to eliminate any potential future threats and reinforce the idea that loyalty to the emperor was non-negotiable. The political context of these punishments cannot be overstated. Ancient China's imperial system was built on the concept of the mandate of heaven, which held that the emperor's right to rule was divinely ordained. Any challenge to this authority was seen as a threat not only to the emperor but to the cosmic order itself. Rebellion, therefore, was not just a crime against the state, it was a sin against the heavens. The extreme punishment served as a way to restore this divine order and reaffirm the emperor's legitimacy. This system of justice was also deeply tied to Confucian values, which emphasized hierarchy, loyalty, and filial piety. By punishing not just the rebel but their entire family, the state reinforced the idea that individual actions had far-reaching consequences, affecting not only the person but their entire lineage. It was a stark reminder that loyalty to the emperor and adherence to societal norms were paramount. As we reflect on these harsh measures, it's clear that ancient China's approach to rebellion was as much about maintaining political control as it was about instilling fear. The punishments were designed to crush dissent before it could take root, ensuring the stability of the empire. Next, we'll explore another fascinating aspect of ancient justice: how the Romans dealt with patricide, a crime that struck at the very heart of family and authority. Stay with us as we continue our journey through the bizarre and often brutal world of ancient laws and punishments. Now, shifting our focus to ancient Rome, we uncover a punishment that strikes at the very core of family and authority: patricide, the act of killing one's father. In Roman society, where paternal authority was sacrosanct, this crime was considered one of the most heinous offenses imaginable. The punishment for patricide was not only brutal but also deeply symbolic, reflecting the cultural values of the time. In ancient Rome, those convicted of killing their father faced a fate so horrifying it was designed to shock and deter. The offender would be sewn into a sack, often made of leather or cloth, along with a collection of live animals, typically a dog, a rooster, a snake, and a monkey. This grotesque assembly was then thrown into a river where the condemned would drown. The inclusion of animals added a layer of humiliation and terror, as each creature was thought to represent chaos and disorder, further emphasizing the gravity of the crime. This punishment, known as the pona cullae, or punishment of the sack, was rooted in Roman beliefs about family and societal order. The father, or paterfamilias, held absolute authority over the household, and his role was seen as essential to maintaining stability and continuity. To kill one's father was not just a personal betrayal but an attack on the very foundation of Roman society. The punishment, therefore, was not merely about retribution. It was a public spectacle meant to restore the moral and social order that had been violated. The cultural significance of this punishment cannot be overstated. In Roman law and tradition, the family was the cornerstone of society, and paternal authority was considered almost sacred. The paterfamilias had the power of life and death over his household, and his role was seen as a microcosm of the emperor's authority over the state. By punishing patricide in such a dramatic and symbolic way, the Romans reinforced the idea that any challenge to paternal authority was a threat to the entire social fabric. Interestingly, this punishment also reflected Roman beliefs about purification and the afterlife. Being thrown into a river was seen as a way to cleanse the community of the offender's crime, while the animals symbolized the chaos and impurity that the act of patricide had introduced. The punishment was as much about restoring cosmic balance as it was about delivering justice. As we consider this brutal practice, it's clear that the Roman approach to patricide was deeply intertwined with their values of hierarchy, loyalty, and order. The extreme measures taken to punish this crime reveal just how seriously the Romans took the sanctity of family and the authority of the paterfamilias. Next, we'll turn our attention to ancient India, where heresy and blasphemy were met with equally severe consequences. Stay with us as we continue to explore the fascinating and often shocking world of ancient laws and punishments. Now, let's journey to ancient India, where the laws surrounding heresy and blasphemy reveal a society deeply rooted in spiritual and social order. In this civilization, where religion and daily life were inseparable, challenging sacred beliefs or disrespecting the gods was not just a personal offense, it was seen as a threat to the very fabric of the community. The punishments for heresy and blasphemy were severe, reflecting the immense importance placed on maintaining religious harmony and societal stability. In ancient India, those accused of heresy, denying or rejecting established religious doctrines, or blasphemy, showing contempt or irreverence towards sacred figures or practices, could face exile or even death. Exile was particularly devastating as it meant being cast out from one's community, family, and spiritual support systems. For a society where one's identity was deeply tied to their place within the social and religious order, exile was a punishment that struck at the heart of a person's existence. In more extreme cases, particularly when heresy was seen as inciting rebellion or widespread dissent, the punishment could escalate to execution. The severity of these punishments was rooted in the belief that heresy and blasphemy disrupted the cosmic and social order known as Dharma. Dharma was the moral and ethical framework that governed not only individual behavior but also the functioning of the universe itself. To challenge or disrespect this framework was to invite chaos both spiritually and socially. The laws against heresy and blasphemy were designed to protect this delicate balance, ensuring that the community remained aligned with divine principles. Religious leaders, or Brahmins, played a central role in enforcing these laws. As the custodians of sacred knowledge and rituals, they held significant authority in determining what constituted heresy or blasphemy. Their judgments were often final, and their influence extended into both the spiritual and legal realms. This intertwining of religion and law meant that punishments for heresy were not just about retribution, they were also about purification. By removing the offender from society, the community believed it was cleansing itself of spiritual pollution and restoring harmony. The social implications of these laws were equally profound. In a society structured around the caste system, where each individual's role and status were divinely ordained, heresy and blasphemy were seen as direct challenges to this hierarchy. To question religious authority was to question the very foundation of the social order. As a result, the punishment served as a stark reminder of the consequences of stepping outside the boundaries of accepted belief and behavior. Interestingly, these laws also highlight the tension between individual expression and collective responsibility in ancient India. While the punishments were harsh, they were also a reflection of the belief that the actions of one person could have far-reaching consequences for the entire community. This emphasis on collective well-being over individual freedom underscores the deeply communal nature of ancient Indian society. As we reflect on these laws, it's clear that the punishments for heresy and blasphemy in ancient India were not just about enforcing religious conformity. They were about preserving a way of life that was deeply intertwined with spiritual and social order. Next, we'll turn our attention to ancient Babylon, where negligence in maintaining property could lead to severe consequences. Stay with us as we continue to uncover the fascinating and often surprising world of ancient laws and punishments. Now, let's shift our focus to ancient Babylon, where the concept of responsibility was taken so seriously that even negligence could lead to harsh consequences. In this civilization, known for its advanced legal system and the famous Code of Hammurabi, failing to maintain property or fulfill one's duties wasn't just seen as careless, it was considered a threat to the stability of the community. The Babylonians believed that every individual had a role to play in upholding the social and economic order, and neglecting those responsibilities could disrupt the delicate balance of their society. One striking example of this can be found in the laws surrounding property maintenance. If a homeowner failed to repair a crumbling wall or a damaged structure, and that negligence resulted in harm to others, such as a collapse that injured a neighbor or damaged their property, the homeowner could face severe penalties. In some cases, the punishment was financial, requiring the negligent party to compensate the victim for their losses. However, in more extreme situations, the consequences could escalate to physical punishment or even death. This was especially true if the negligence was seen as willful or reckless, demonstrating a blatant disregard for the well-being of others. The Babylonians viewed responsibility as a cornerstone of their society. Their legal system was designed to ensure that everyone contributed to the collective good, and negligence was seen as a failure to uphold that duty. This emphasis on accountability extended beyond property maintenance to other areas of life, such as business dealings and agricultural practices. For instance, if a farmer neglected to properly irrigate their fields, leading to crop failure and food shortages, they could be held legally responsible for the impact on the community. What's fascinating about these laws is how they reflect the interconnectedness of Babylonian society. The well-being of one person was seen as directly tied to the actions of another, and negligence wasn't just a personal failing, it was a communal concern. By enforcing strict punishments for negligence, the Babylonians sought to create a culture of diligence and care, where individuals were motivated to act responsibly not just for their own sake, but for the sake of everyone around them. This focus on responsibility also highlights the practical nature of Babylonian law. While their punishments could be severe, they were often rooted in a desire to prevent harm and maintain order. By holding individuals accountable for their actions, the legal system aimed to deter negligence and encourage proactive behavior. It was a way of ensuring that the community could thrive, free from the chaos that carelessness could bring. As we explore these ancient laws, it's clear that the Babylonians placed a high value on responsibility and accountability. Their approach to negligence serves as a reminder of how interconnected societies rely on the actions of each individual to function smoothly. Next, we'll delve into ancient Greece, where treason was met with some of the harshest punishments in history. Stay with us as we continue to uncover the fascinating and often surprising world of ancient laws and punishments. Now, let's turn our attention to ancient Greece, a civilization renowned for its contributions to philosophy, democracy, and the arts. But beneath the surface of its cultural achievements lay a strict and often unforgiving legal system, particularly when it came to crimes against the state. Treason, the act of betraying one's city-state, was considered one of the most heinous offenses, and the punishments reflected the gravity of the crime. In the Greek city-states, loyalty to the polis, the community, and its governing body was paramount. The survival and prosperity of these small, independent states depended on the unwavering allegiance of their citizens. Treason, therefore, wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was seen as a direct threat to the stability and security of the entire community. Those accused of treason faced severe consequences, often exile or execution, depending on the severity of their actions and the political climate of the time. Exile was a common punishment for treason, particularly in cases where the accused was a prominent figure or had influential connections. Being exiled meant losing one's home, family, and social standing, effectively cutting the individual off from everything they held dear. For many Greeks, exile was a fate worse than death, as it stripped them of their identity and left them vulnerable in a world where belonging to a city-state was essential for survival. However, in more extreme cases, treason could result in execution. This was especially true during times of war or political upheaval when the stakes were highest. Executions were often public, serving as a stark warning to others who might consider betraying their city-state. The methods varied, but they were designed to be both punitive and symbolic, reinforcing the idea that treason was an unforgivable crime. The political context of loyalty and betrayal in ancient Greece was complex. City-states like Athens and Sparta were fiercely independent, often competing or even warring with one another. This environment fostered a strong sense of civic duty, but it also created opportunities for betrayal. Political rivalries, personal grievances, and external pressures could all lead individuals to commit treason, whether by conspiring with enemy states or undermining their own government from within. What's particularly interesting is how the Greeks viewed treason not just as a legal offense, but as a moral failing. To betray one's city-state was to betray the very ideals of citizenship and community. This perspective shaped their approach to punishment, which was as much about restoring order as it was about deterring future betrayals. As we reflect on these ancient laws, it's clear that the Greeks placed immense value on loyalty and civic responsibility. Their harsh punishments for treason underscore the importance they placed on maintaining the integrity of their city-states, even in the face of internal and external threats. Next, we'll explore the Mayan civilization, where accusations of witchcraft could lead to some of the most dramatic and terrifying punishments in history. Stay with us as we continue our journey through the strange and often shocking world of ancient laws and punishments. Now, let's journey to the heart of the ancient Mayan civilization, where the line between the natural and the supernatural was often blurred. In Mayan society, witchcraft wasn't just a crime, it was a direct challenge to the cosmic order. The Mayans believed deeply in the power of magic and the influence of the spiritual world on everyday life. Those accused of practicing witchcraft faced some of the most severe punishments, reflecting the fear and reverence the Mayans held for the unseen forces around them. Witchcraft in Mayan culture was seen as a dangerous manipulation of these forces, often used to harm others or disrupt the balance of the community. Accusations of witchcraft could arise from unexplained illnesses, crop failures, or even personal rivalries. Once accused, individuals were subjected to intense scrutiny, and if found guilty, the consequences were dire. Punishments ranged from public humiliation to execution, depending on the perceived severity of the crime. Public humiliation was a common method of punishment designed to shame the accused and deter others from engaging in similar practices. This could involve being paraded through the streets, stripped of status, or forced to endure public ridicule. For the Mayans, shame was a powerful tool, as it not only punished the individual but also reinforced societal norms and values. In more extreme cases, witchcraft could result in death. Executions were often carried out in ways that mirrored the perceived threat of the accused's magic. For example, those believed to have used witchcraft to harm others might be sacrificed in rituals meant to appease the gods and restore balance. These rituals were deeply symbolic, reflecting the Mayan belief that the spiritual and physical worlds were interconnected. The cultural significance of witchcraft in Mayan society cannot be overstated. Magic was not inherently evil. It was a tool that could be used for good or ill. Healers and shamans, for instance, were respected figures who used their knowledge of the supernatural to benefit the community. However, when magic was used to cause harm, it was seen as a betrayal of the trust placed in those who wielded such power. This duality, reverence for the supernatural and fear of its misuse, shaped the Mayan approach to witchcraft. Their harsh punishments were not just about retribution, they were about maintaining harmony between the human and spiritual realms. As we move forward, we'll wrap up our exploration of these bizarre ancient laws and punishments, reflecting on how they reveal the values and fears of the societies that created them. Stay with us as we bring this fascinating journey to a close. As we bring our journey through these 25 bizarre ancient laws and punishments to a close, it's clear that each one offers a unique window into the values, fears, and priorities of the societies that created them. From the eye for an eye justice of Hammurabi's code to the Mayan rituals addressing witchcraft, these laws were not just about maintaining order, they were about preserving the very fabric of their cultures. They reveal what these civilizations held sacred, what they feared most, and how they sought to protect their communities from perceived threats. These ancient laws remind us that justice, morality, and punishment are deeply rooted in the context of their time. What seems harsh or bizarre to us today was often seen as necessary or even righteous in its historical setting. It's fascinating to consider how future generations might view our own laws and punishments. Will they find our systems of justice equally strange or extreme? As we reflect on these ancient practices, let's not forget that history is a mirror, showing us not only where we've been but also how far we've come. If you found this exploration of ancient laws as intriguing as we did, don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Which of these punishments surprised you the most? And if you're hungry for more historical mysteries, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for joining us on this journey through time. We'll see you in the next one.